Marcus Webb had spent 7 years building his sanctuary. Not metaphorically, literally. Every brick, every stone, every carefully placed plant around the perimeter of his newly constructed backyard oasis represented a chapter of his healing. The pool itself was the crown jewel. 15,000 square feet of Italian marble decking, heated saltwater, and a custom-built water feature that cascaded from 3 levels. He designed it after his divorce, after the custody battle he'd lost, after watching his ex-wife move the kids 3 states away. The pool was where he'd learned to breathe again. It was Wednesday, 2:47 p.m., and Marcus was sitting on his favorite lounger, teak, imported, positioned perfectly to catch the afternoon sun without glare, reading a legal brief on his tablet. He was a family law attorney, ironically enough. He understood custody agreements, visitation rights, the painful mathematics of child support. He understood loss. The neighborhood was quiet, the kind of quiet you paid for in this part of Westchester County. The McMansions were spread far enough apart that you could pretend you were the only person on Earth. That was the whole point. The sound came first, a high, piercing giggle, childlike, not his own. Marcus looked up from his tablet just as the first head appeared above the fence line. A boy, maybe 8, with sun-bleached hair and a mischievous grin that didn't ask permission. He was climbing the wooden lattice work Marcus had installed specifically to discourage just this kind of trespassing. "Hey," Marcus called out, not hostile yet just surprised. "This is private property." The boy didn't hesitate. He climbed higher, legs over the fence now, and then, splash. He was in the pool before Marcus could stand up. "What the—" Marcus started, but a second splash cut him off. Another child, a girl this time, maybe 6, had followed the boy over. She came up sputtering and laughing, arms flailing in the deep end. "Sarah, to the shallow end," the boy called out, and he was swimming toward her, all confidence and 8-year-old invincibility. Marcus moved quickly across the decking, his professional demeanor fragmenting. "Kids, get out of the pool right now. This is not, you can't just—" The boy treaded water, grinning up at him. "Come on, mister, this is awesome. Sarah, isn't this awesome?" "So awesome," Sarah squealed, paddling ineffectively in the water. "Out now," Marcus used his courtroom voice, the one that made witnesses reconsider their lies. "Where are your parents?" "Our mom's home," the boy said with the casual certainty of someone completely unaware he was in trouble. "She said we could play in the neighborhood. She didn't say we couldn't play here." Marcus's jaw tightened. He walked to the fence line and looked over. Sure enough, 30 feet away, their backyard was visible through a section of his carefully trimmed hedges, and sitting at their patio table, actually visible through the opening, was a woman. She had honey blonde hair, lots of it, styled in the kind of way that involved probably 3 hours at a salon. She was holding what looked like a martini at 2:47 in the afternoon, and she was watching her children swim in Marcus's pool with what appeared to be complete indifference. He made eye contact with her. She raised her martini in acknowledgement. Then she laughed. It was audible even at this distance, a braying, theatrical sound that seemed to echo off the pool water. She didn't get up, didn't call her children out, just sat there, drinking, watching, laughing at this man's visible frustration. "You two out of the pool, now." Marcus tried to keep his voice level, but something cold was settling into his chest. "This is not a public facility. This is my private property. I need you to—" "Don't be such a buzzkill, mister," the boy called out, now doing a cannonball, sending water everywhere. "This is the coolest pool in the whole neighborhood." "Last warning," Marcus said quietly. He pulled his phone out of his pocket and walked toward the fence opening. The woman at the patio table was still there, still watching, and now she was actually smiling. Bold-faced, unrepentant smiling. "Excuse me," Marcus said, approaching her property. He could feel his lawyer's mask settling into place, the one he wore when dealing with unreasonable people. "I'm Marcus Webb. I live next door. Your children are in my pool without permission." "Oh, I know who you are." She stood up, surprisingly tall in her white linen shorts and designer sandals. She had one of those ageless faces that could have been 35 or 50, kept that way through religion-level commitment to skincare and probably a plastic surgeon on speed dial. "You're the one who got all bent out of shape last month when Max's soccer ball went into your yard. You didn't even throw it back. You made him come get it like he'd committed some kind of crime. Your ball was on my property. I needed to ensure that my kid understood the tragedy of an errant soccer ball. Yeah, we got the message." She smiled wider. I'm Karen, by the way, Karen Matthews. Welcome to the neighborhood, sort of. Your children are trespassing and using my pool without permission, Mrs. Matthews. I need them out of there immediately. Karen, she corrected. And they're not hurting anything. The water's already there. What's it costing you? An extra couple gallons of chlorine. Marcus felt something brittle inside him. The calm, measured attorney disappeared. In his place stood a man who'd given up his marriage, his daily access to his own children, 7 years of grief, all to build something that was his, something he controlled, something that was safe. The pool is filtered and maintained to specific chemical levels. They're introducing contaminants, bacteria, potential pathogens. Oh my God, Karen actually rolled her eyes. They're children, not contamination vectors. Relax. I need them out of my pool, now. Karen took a long sip of her martini. Then, in no hurry whatsoever, she raised her voice. Kids, come on out. The pool police wants us to leave. The children, who'd been having the time of their lives, waded reluctantly toward the pool's edge. The boy pulled himself up with Marcus's expensive deck towel, the Egyptian cotton ones, and shook water everywhere. Thanks for letting us use your pool, mister, the girl called out. I didn't let you, Marcus began, but Karen was already ushering them back toward her property, and she was still laughing that somehow managed to sound both amused and contemptuous all at once. Seriously, though, Karen called back as she led her children through the hedge opening. You should think about loosening up a little. This whole obsessive control thing, she gestured vaguely at his perfectly maintained yard. It's not a good look. Life's supposed to be fun. She disappeared through the hedges, and Marcus heard the sound of her patio door sliding closed. He stood there in the late afternoon sun, water dripping from his expensive deck towels, chlorine already needing rebalancing, and felt something shift. It was small at first, a hairline fracture in his carefully constructed piece, but fractures spread. He picked up his tablet and made a note. Karen Matthews, 47 Ridgewood Lane, children unsupervised, trespassing, no boundaries, problem. He didn't know why he was writing it down. He didn't know what he planned to do with the information. He just knew that Karen Matthews had laughed at him, actually laughed at the most reasonable request, that she keep her children off his property, and something in the equation of his carefully balanced life had stopped balancing. He spent the rest of the evening running extra chlorine cycles and checking the pool's pH levels obsessively. But he couldn't shake the image of Karen's face, that martini, her raised eyebrow like he was some kind of joke. By the time he went to bed, he wasn't just angry, he was planning. And Marcus Webb was very, very good at planning. First incident, Saturday morning, 10:15 a.m. Marcus was meeting with a client via Zoom call from his pool house office when he noticed movement in the water. 2 children, 1 boy, 1 girl, Sarah and Max, he'd learned their names now, were floating on noodles in his pool, apparently holding some kind of race. Karen was nowhere to be seen, which somehow made it worse. Second incident, Thursday afternoon, 3:30 p.m. Marcus arrived home from the office to find an actual birthday party in progress. Approximately 12 children, ranging from 6 to 10 years old, were in his pool. Karen had apparently decided that his property was the neighborhood's de facto community center. When he rushed over to the fence, she waved at him from her patio like they were old friends sharing a moment. It's Max's birthday, she called out cheerfully. Want some cake? Third incident, the following Tuesday. Marcus came home to find the pool covered in, and he counted approximately 200 flower petals, pink ones, white ones. He discovered upon investigation that one of Karen's friends, a woman named Deborah with unfortunately aggressive energy and a matching aggressive ponytail, was having an impromptu pool yoga meditation session. There were at least 8 people in his pool, striking poses, breathing heavily, finding their chakras or whatever else needed finding. By the third incident, Marcus wasn't just angry, he was systematic. He bought a Ring camera, then a second one, then a third. He positioned them to capture every angle of his property, his fence line, and Karen's yard on the other side. He created a private Google Drive folder titled Documentation. On a spreadsheet, he began recording dates, times, the number of trespassers, the nature of the trespass, and photographic evidence. He wrote descriptions in clinical legal language. Unauthorized pool usage, approximately 6 children present, unsupervised minor left unattended in deep water, clear safety hazard. This was what he knew how to do. This was how he won. His ex-wife had had better lawyers and more money, but she hadn't documented the time she'd shown up 40 minutes late to pick up his daughter with a man who definitely wasn't her current husband. Marcus had documented it. He'd built a case file so thorough and so devastating that the judge had reduced her custody percentage by 15 points. He knew how to turn moments into evidence, incidents into patterns, irritations into irrefutable proof of negligence. The thing was, Karen had no idea he was doing it. She continued with her casual disregard for boundaries. The children continued to treat his pool like a public recreation facility, and Marcus continued to build his case. He wasn't sure what he was building it for yet, but he knew he would need it. It came to a head on a Wednesday evening, 3 weeks after the first incident. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple that would have been beautiful if Marcus had been able to appreciate anything at that moment. He was working in his home office when he saw the notification on his phone, motion detected by the pool. He pulled up the ring footage. There were 4 children in his pool, but one of them was a child he didn't recognize, a much younger child, maybe 4 years old, just a toddler really, in yellow water wings that were clearly not designed for actual swimming support. And Karen wasn't visible anywhere. Marcus went cold. He got out of his chair and walked to the window that overlooked the pool. Through the darkness, lit by the soft glow of his underwater lights, he could see it clearly. A 4-year-old in water wings, no adult anywhere in sight, in a deep swimming pool surrounded by slightly older children who had no business supervising anything. That was when Marcus understood what he'd been building the case for. He picked up his phone and called 911. "I need to report child endangerment," he said calmly to the dispatcher. "There is an unsupervised 4-year-old in my pool on my private property without parental consent or supervision. The child is in immediate danger. My address is 52 Ridgewood Lane." He watched from his window as the police arrived. He'd given them permission to access his ring footage. He'd shown them his spreadsheet. He'd explained Karen's pattern of allowing unsupervised trespassing. He was the model of a concerned citizen. Karen came running out of her house when the officers knocked on her door, barefoot, her evening drink abandoned on the kitchen counter behind her. "What is this?" she demanded. "My kids are just swimming." "In someone else's pool," the officer said, and there was no humor in his voice. "Without the owner's permission, and we're going to need to talk about that 4-year-old. Whose child is that?" "That's my nephew," Karen said quickly. "He's just visiting. And he's here without his parents' knowledge." "I'm his aunt." "That doesn't give you authority over someone else's child, ma'am, and you're allowing unauthorized access to someone else's private property, multiple times. The owner has documentation." He held up his phone where Marcus's spreadsheet was now very visible. Marcus watched from his window as Karen's face went through several phases. Confusion, then irritation, then anger, and finally, something that looked almost like shame. Almost, but not quite. The police stayed for 40 minutes. They cited her for trespassing, for endangering a minor, for reckless supervision. They took statements. They photographed the pool, his security cameras, his locked gate that apparently Karen had been clever enough to figure out how to open. When they finally left, Karen stood in her driveway watching them go, her arms wrapped around herself. And then, impossibly, Marcus saw her shoulders shake. She was laughing. Not quietly, not to herself. She was laughing hard enough that he could see it from 50 feet away, from inside his climate-controlled home office, through his expensive security system. She looked up at his window. She couldn't see him, but she knew he was there, and she held up one hand in a wave, still laughing. Then she went back inside. Marcus stood at his window for a long time after that. He'd won. The case was documented, the police had been involved, the legal framework had shifted in his favor. But Karen's laughter echoed in his head in a way her defeat hadn't managed to touch. He didn't know it yet, but that was the moment everything started to unravel. Not Karen's life, his. Because the next morning, something strange happened. Marcus got a text from a number he didn't recognize. "Hey, this is Jennifer Wu. I live on Ridgewood Lane. I heard what happened with Karen. That's really unfair that you called the police on her." Before he could respond, another message came through. Then another. Then 5 more. Then 10. By the time he checked his email, there were messages from neighbors he'd never spoken to, all saying variations of the same thing. I can't believe you got the police involved over kids having fun. That's not what this community is about. One message was from the neighborhood HOA president. We need to talk about the tone you're setting here. Marcus felt something shift in his chest. He had won the battle, but he'd misunderstood the war entirely. Karen hadn't just been a negligent mother. She'd been a popular negligent mother, a well-liked one. A woman who threw parties and shared drinks with her neighbors and had somehow built a community around herself while Marcus had been building walls around his pool. He'd documented her sins carefully, but he'd failed to account for the most dangerous variable of all, the human capacity for loyalty to someone likable, even when that someone was clearly in the wrong. It was subtle at first. The smile from the couple 2 doors down became less warm. The wave from the man who walked his dog past Marcus's house turned into a deliberate non-wave. People who'd previously seemed friendly began crossing the street when they saw him coming. Marcus, who'd spent 7 years perfecting his ability to read rooms and predict outcomes, suddenly found himself unable to predict anything. He was at the grocery store on Friday morning when he saw Karen. She was in the produce section, looking at heirloom tomatoes with what appeared to be genuine contentment. She was with another woman, the aggressive ponytail yoga lady from the meditation incident, and they were laughing about something. When Karen saw Marcus, she didn't look away. She smiled. And then she said something to ponytail lady, who burst out laughing, and they both stared directly at him as he pretended to examine avocados with intense focus. "Hey, Marcus," Karen called out brightly, "how's your chlorine level?" A few people in the produce section turned to look. "Everything okay?" Karen continued loud enough for her audience. "You seem stressed. You should try yoga. Deborah's starting a meditation class in the neighborhood. You should join. Might help with the whole control freak vibe you've got going." Marcus paid for his avocados and left without responding. In his car, his hands shook on the steering wheel. This was not how it was supposed to work. He'd had documentation. He'd called the authorities. The system had backed him up. But the system didn't account for the fact that Karen Matthews was apparently a community fixture, and he was the outsider who'd called the cops on a neighborhood's friend. That evening, he got a call from his therapist, Dr. Reeves. "Marcus, I got a call from someone. They didn't identify themselves, but they suggested that you were engaging in obsessive, controlling behavior, that you were monitoring your property excessively, and that this might be related to your previous custody issues." Marcus felt his stomach drop. "Who called you?" "I can't discuss that, but I want to check in with you. How are you feeling about the incident with your neighbor?" "I feel like I reported child endangerment, which is what I was supposed to do." "But how do you feel emotionally?" Dr. Reeves was good at her job. That was the problem. "Do you feel like you're projecting some of your past experiences onto this situation?" "No," Marcus said, but the word felt hollow in his mouth. "I documented a pattern of trespassing and reckless behavior." "Documented might be the operative word there," Dr. Reeves said gently. "How long did you spend on this documentation?" Marcus didn't answer. "I'm wondering if you might be experiencing some escalating behaviors related to your need for control," she continued. "After the divorce, you rebuilt your external world very carefully. Your home, your property, your routines. And when that world was disrupted, you responded with escalation rather than de-escalation. I think we should talk about that." After he hung up, Marcus sat in his living room and thought about boundaries, about where they ended and obsession began, about whether the fact that he was right made him any less wrong. The breaking point came on Sunday. Marcus was in his home office when his phone started buzzing, not with individual notifications, but with a sustained assault of them. Text messages, Facebook notifications, Instagram tags, his email inbox expanding in real time. At first, he couldn't understand what was happening. Then he opened Facebook and saw it. A video posted by Karen Matthews. It was 45 seconds long. It showed her 2 children and the toddler with water wings playing in his pool. But the angle was strange. It had been shot from Marcus's own security camera footage. He knew because he recognized the timestamp in the corner, but it had been edited with text overlays. A man was so angry that his neighborhood kids wanted to have fun that he called the police on this 4-year-old. Cut to Marcus's spreadsheet, zoomed in on the clinical descriptions. He's been documenting and monitoring children through his security cameras. Cut to clips of Marcus's empty property, his pristine pool, his carefully manicured everything. When people try to share joy in his neighborhood, he files reports. The final text overlay read, "This man doesn't deserve a beautiful home if he refuses to share its beauty with the community around him." And then the video ended with Coren's face, looking directly into the camera, her expression a perfect mixture of sadness and righteousness. "All we were trying to do was let our children play," she said quietly. "I never expected to be treated like a criminal for that." The video ended. Marcus checked the view count. 47,000 views, 2,300 comments, 1,800 shares. And it was still climbing. He read the comments with a growing sense of unreality. "This man is disgusting. Call the cops on kids having fun. What happened to community? He's definitely a control freak. Look at his property. Who maintains their yard like that unless they're insane? Honestly, I hope his pool gets destroyed. He deserves it." This is an example of toxic masculinity. He's punishing this woman for being happy. He's the real criminal here, preying on a single mother. That last comment made Marcus's eyes widen. He checked Coren's profile. There was no mention anywhere that she was a single mother. But in the ecosystem of social media narrative, it didn't matter. The story was more compelling that way, and once a story took root, it was harder to kill than any actual fact. His phone rang. It was his law firm's managing partner, Richard. "What the hell is this video?" Richard didn't bother with greetings. "It's my neighbor," Marcus started, but Richard cut him off. "I know who it is. More importantly, our clients know who it is. We're getting calls from people asking if we want to represent someone who monitors children through security cameras. That's the narrative, Marcus. That's what's going out into the world." "That's not what I was doing." "That's what it looks like, and in the court of public opinion, optics are everything." Richard's voice was sharp. "I need you to take some time off, a lot of time. Don't post anything, don't comment anywhere. Certainly don't respond to this woman, just disappear from the internet for a while." "Richard." "I'm not asking, I'm telling you. As a partner at this firm, you're on immediate leave effective now. Don't come into the office. We'll handle your cases. You focus on managing this situation." The line went dead. Marcus sat in his office chair and watched the video's view count tick upward. 87,000, 143,000, 201,000. He pulled up Coren's Facebook page. She'd posted updates. "Still can't believe I'm being painted as the villain for wanting my children to have memories. The community has been so supportive. It's nice to know that most people understand the difference between appropriate boundaries and paranoia. I'm considering consulting with a lawyer about defamation. A man's excessive monitoring of children is exactly the kind of behavior we should all be concerned about." That was clever, very clever. By threatening to sue him for defamation, she was both claiming victim status and keeping the story alive. Journalists loved that. Conflict with a happy ending, victim sues her abuser, was catnip for the internet. Marcus did something he didn't usually do. He called his ex-wife. Sharon's voice on the phone had the particular tone reserved for people calling after years of painful silence. Wary. "What's wrong?" she asked immediately. "Nothing's wrong, there's a situation, there's a video online. People are saying things about me that aren't true, and He stopped. He could hear how he sounded, like a man unraveling. "I wanted to know if the kids have seen it." There was a pause, then Sharon said very quietly, "Yes, they've seen it. Mia asked me if her father was a bad person who hated children." The words felt like physical impact. "She's 9, Marcus, and she watches a video that suggests you monitor children through surveillance cameras like some kind of predator. How do you think she feels about that?" "It's not true. It's completely fabricated." "I know it's not true, but she doesn't. Not really. She's 9 and she reads comments from strangers saying her father is toxic and dangerous. You want to know what she asked me? She asked if that's why you didn't want custody." Marcus couldn't speak, couldn't breathe, couldn't do anything except understand with perfect clarity that he just lost something he didn't even know he still had. The possibility that his children might think well of him. "I'm sorry, Sharon. I didn't mean for this to." "I know you didn't, but it did, and now we all get to deal with it." She hung up. Marcus sat in the darkness of his home office and watched his world burn on the internet in real time. The video had now been shared to Reddit, Twitter, TikTok. News outlets were starting to pick it up. Obsessive neighbor calls police on children's pool party. His law firm's main phone line, according to a text from the receptionist, had been receiving calls from people wanting to file complaints against him with the state bar. And somewhere in her house next door, Corinne Matthews was probably smiling. Someone had thrown a rock through Marcus's front window, not a big rock, just big enough to shatter glass and deliver a message. Attached to the rock with red tape was a printed note, "Child hater." Marcus cleaned up the glass and called the police. The officer who came was the same one who'd responded to his call about the trespassing. He looked at the broken window, then at Marcus, with an expression that suggested he was trying very hard not to form opinions. "Any idea who did this?" the officer asked. "There's a video online about me," Marcus said. "It's been viewed over 2 million times. It says I monitor children through surveillance cameras. The tone is hostile." The officer nodded slowly. "The Corinne Matthews video." "You've seen it?" "Everybody's seen it. My wife sent it to me." The officer shifted his weight. "Look, I understand your frustration, but there's not much we can do about this. You didn't see who threw the rock. Could have been anyone. And the video itself, while probably not entirely fair, isn't technically illegal. Someone attacked my home. Someone threw a rock. It happens." The officer wasn't being unkind, but he wasn't being helpful either. "You could install better security, repair the window, move on." After he left, Marcus sat on his couch and understood that the police, the system that had backed him, were no longer going to do so. The narrative had shifted. He was no longer a victim of trespassing. He was the antagonist in someone else's story. The next thing that happened was worse. His car was keyed. Not scratched, keyed. Deep, deliberate gouges that spelled out pedo on his driver's side door. It must have happened while he was in his house overnight. He found it when he went to work on Tuesday morning, though work wasn't really an option anymore. Richard had extended his leave indefinitely, pending resolution of the current situation. Marcus filed a police report and then sat in his car and cried for the first time since the divorce. Not clean tears. The kind that come with hyperventilation and the understanding that everything you've built can be destroyed not by bad luck or legal outcomes, but by narrative. By the simple fact that people believed a story more than they believed facts. The neighborhood was no longer neutral. He began noticing it in small ways. When he took his trash cans to the curb, his neighbors watched. When he watered his lawn, people stopped their cars to stare. Someone had started leaving notes on his doorstep, not all hostile, some almost performatively sad. "Prayers for your healing," or "Your house is beautiful, but your heart isn't." His HOA sent him a formal letter on Thursday. The Ridgewood Lane Homeowners Association had received multiple complaints regarding his property. Specifically, the visible security cameras were now considered a violation of community standards. Security equipment must be discreet and integrated into landscape architecture. And his Ring cameras were surveillance devices that violate community trust and privacy standards. They were going to fine him if he didn't remove them. Marcus read the letter twice, understanding in that second read that Corinne had weaponized the system against him. His own tools, documentation, evidence gathering, legal standards, had been flipped. Surveillance cameras that were perfectly reasonable for home security now made him a threat. Rules he'd followed became rules he'd broken by the retroactive judgment of a community that had decided they didn't like him. He removed the cameras on Friday morning. That afternoon, he got another video notification. This one from his neighbor across the street. He'd kept one camera, the one facing the pool, which was technically his own property and couldn't violate any privacy rules, and someone had spray-painted it black. He stood in his backyard, looking at the blackened camera, and felt something inside him break with an almost audible snap. He went inside and opened his laptop. It took him 2 hours to find all the copies of the video, every platform it had been shared to, every comment, every expansion and elaboration. He read about himself through the eyes of people who'd never met him, creepy loner, predatory, the kind of neighbor nobody wants. And then he saw it. Buried in a subreddit dedicated to crazy neighbors, someone had tracked down his law firm, posted his work email, posted his photo from the firm's website. tagged a major news outlet and suggested they might want to interview the monster of Westchester. The story had graduated. It was no longer just social media. It was becoming journalism. And worse, it was becoming true by sheer force of repetition and volume. Marcus went to his kitchen and poured himself a drink. Then another. By the time evening fell, he'd gone through half a bottle of whiskey and was sitting in his backyard, staring at the pool that had become the center of his destruction. He thought about draining it, about filling it with concrete, about erasing the thing that had started all of this. But even as he thought it, he understood that it wouldn't matter. The pool wasn't the problem. Karen wasn't the problem. He was the problem, or rather, the story had decided he was, and stories were more powerful than facts. His phone rang at 10 p.m. It was a CNN producer. "Mr. Webb, I'm calling about the viral video. We'd like to do a follow-up interview. There's clearly more to this story." Marcus hung up. He turned off his phone entirely. And then, in the darkness of his backyard, with the neighborhood sleeping around him and his beautiful, useless pool gleaming in the moonlight, Marcus Webb understood something that made the panic worse instead of better. Karen hadn't won because she was right. She'd won because she was smarter. She'd seen something in him, the brittleness, the need for control, the isolation, and she'd weaponized his own nature against him. He'd been so careful to build an airtight case against her that he'd failed to see he was building one for the internet against himself. Obsessive, controlling, friendless, a man who monitored children and called the police on birthday parties. The story fit too perfectly. And in the age of virality, perfect stories always crushed messy truths. He ordered groceries online, streamed movies he didn't watch, and spent most of his time reading the news coverage of his own downfall. 3 separate journalists had now written pieces about the pool paradox, when personal property becomes a community battleground. One article was sympathetic. It mentioned that his documentation was legally justified and that Karen had indeed engaged in trespassing. But even the sympathetic article's headline was, "One man's security became one woman's persecution." The narrative had settled into a kind of archetype. David vs. Goliath, except he was Goliath, and David was a woman with better social skills. By day 5, CNN had moved on to other stories. The view count on Karen's video had plateaued around 12 million. The outrage, as internet outrage did, was beginning to fade into the background noise of 10,000 new controversies. Marcus thought maybe it would be over. Then his landline rang on Thursday morning at 8 a.m. It was his ex-wife, and she was barely containing her rage. "Did you call Mia?" she demanded. "No, I've turned off my phone. I haven't called anyone. She called me from school crying because someone showed her a new video. Someone edited your viral video. They added audio. They added implications." Sharon's voice was shaking. "It sounds like you're confessing. Marcus, what did you do?" "What are you talking about?" Marcus was out of bed now, stumbling to his laptop. "What video?" "Just Google your name. I can't even explain it. Just look at it." He typed his name and "new video" into the search bar. The video was from a channel called Internet Justice, and it had 800,000 views already. Someone had taken Karen's original video and added dubbed audio underneath. The audio was a conversation between a man and a therapist, discussing obsessive behaviors, controlling patterns, unhealthy relationships with children. But the audio wasn't real. It was artificially generated. AI voices. Someone had created fake dialogue, placed it under footage of Marcus's property and his empty, surveillance-heavy yard, and created something that looked, to the untrained ear, like a confession. "I've isolated myself from meaningful relationships," the AI-generated Marcus voice said. "I project my anger onto innocent people." It was brilliant. It was also completely fabricated, but brilliance doesn't matter on the internet. Impact does. By that evening, the new video had 2 million views. By the next morning, major news outlets had picked it up. Viral video evidence appears to show homeowner admitting to obsessive behavior. None of the articles explained that the audio was AI-generated. None of them seemed to care. The story had evolved. He was no longer a petty man defending his property. He was a man admitting on video to his own psychological disorder. Marcus called a lawyer, not from his own firm. He couldn't face those people. He called a criminal defense attorney he knew from law school, a woman named Patricia who specialized in cases with heavy media components. The video is fake, he explained. The audio is artificial intelligence. Someone created it to make me look bad. Patricia listened to the video twice, then sat back in her chair. Okay, she said. Okay, that's good news and bad news. Good news is it's obviously fake. You can prove it. Bad news is you have to prove it, and that's going to require spending a lot of money on expert testimony and media management. And most importantly, you're going to have to get in front of a camera and defend yourself, which, frankly, is going to make you look worse. How could defending myself make me look worse? Because right now, you're the guy not responding, the guy maintaining his dignity through silence. The moment you go on camera and try to explain yourself, you become the guy desperately trying to escape consequences. Optics. Patricia had the particular exhaustion of someone who'd seen this movie too many times. The internet doesn't want explanations, it wants villains. But I can prove the audio is fake. I know, and 6 months from now, after significant legal expenses, you'll win. You'll prove definitively that the audio was fabricated. And by then, nobody will care. The narrative will have moved on. You'll be yesterday's news, and you'll have spent $100,000 being right. Marcus stood up and walked to Patricia's window. Her office overlooked Manhattan, millions of people living lives that had nothing to do with him or his pool or any of this. What do I do? He asked quietly. You could sue, Patricia said. Defamation, harassment, copyright violation of your own image. You'd probably win at least some of those. But you'd be suing a woman who's already got the sympathy of the internet. You'd look vindictive. A lawyer suing a mother of 2 over an internet video, it's not a good look. So I just accept it, except that my life has been destroyed by lies. No, Patricia said. You accept that you made a tactical error and now you have to be very careful about your next move. You move with extreme caution. You get your firm to issue a carefully worded statement on your behalf. You disappear from the internet for 6 months. You let the story die. And then, maybe then, people forget you're the villain in someone else's narrative. Marcus went home and drafted a statement with the help of a PR consultant Patricia recommended. It was careful, measured, slightly remorseful in a way that didn't actually admit to wrongdoing. I recognized that I allowed a neighborhood dispute to escalate inappropriately. While I was justified in reporting a safety concern, I could have handled the situation with more grace and community awareness. It was the kind of statement that admitted nothing and apologized for everything. His firm released it on Friday morning. Karen responded within 4 hours with her own statement. I appreciate Mr. Webb's willingness to reflect. However, I want to make clear that my children and I are still processing the trauma of being targeted for simply wanting to enjoy our community. Then she did something brilliant. She announced a new initiative, Safe Neighborhoods for All Children. It was a nonprofit focused on protecting children in residential communities from excessive surveillance. She was going to start a fund to help provide legal defense for families targeted by vigilante homeowners. In other words, she just turned herself into an activist. She wasn't just a woman who'd made a viral video anymore. She was a crusader. That afternoon, Marcus had a visitor. He didn't answer the door until he recognized, through the peephole, that it was a colleague from his law firm, James, someone Marcus had worked with for 8 years. What are you doing here? Marcus asked, opening the door. I came to tell you in person, James said, and he looked genuinely sorry, which somehow made it worse. The firm's made a decision. We're going to have to ask you to resign, full retirement from the partnership. You're firing me. We're asking you to resign so we don't have to fire you, which is what we'll have to do if you don't. It's better this way, for everyone. Some of our clients have said they'd take their business elsewhere if you remain a partner. Marcus felt like he was watching this happen to someone else. Over a neighborhood dispute that was documented in my spreadsheets. Over the fact that you've become a liability, James said, not unkindly. I'm sorry, but that's where we are. After James left, Marcus sat in his living room and understood that his career was over. Not suspended. Not paused. Over. In the age of virality, his professional reputation didn't matter. His skills, his education, his years of practice didn't matter. What mattered was that someone had made a video and he'd been the antagonist. He called Patricia and told her his firm was asking him to resign. Resign, Patricia said immediately. Do it today. Write a nice statement about wanting to pursue other interests. Don't give them any ammunition. But then I'm admitting something's wrong. You're being strategic. You're removing yourself from a situation where you're toxic. It's actually the smartest move. That evening, Marcus submitted his resignation. And then he did something he'd been avoiding for days. He opened his phone. He had 412 text messages, 267 emails, and approximately 1 million notifications on social media. But one text made him stop. It was from an unknown number. "You destroyed my life for a stupid pool. This isn't over." And then from a different unknown number, "You're getting what you deserve, predator." And then from another, "Kill yourself." He reported the texts to the police. They said there was nothing they could do. He was public figure now, which meant his harassment was everyone's problem and no one's responsibility. That night, Marcus made a decision that surprised him with its clarity. He was going to fight back, not in court where he'd already lost, not on social media where the algorithm belonged to people like Karen, but the way he knew how, the way he'd always won before. He was going to document everything. Every lie, every fabrication, every ethically questionable thing Karen had done. He was going to build a case so airtight, so irrefutable, that it couldn't be dismissed or misunderstood. But this time, he wasn't going to turn it over to the police. This time, he was going to put it on the internet. 2 weeks of going through every piece of footage, every interaction, every moment captured by his camera before it was spray-painted black. He hired a digital forensics expert to examine the fake video and prove definitively that the audio was AI-generated. He requested municipal records and discovered that Karen had been cited multiple times for noise complaints, had a history of complaints with previous neighbors, and had once been sued for failing to repay a loan. None of it was technically damaging, but all of it together told a different story. He hired a videographer and had her assemble everything chronologically. He wrote a narrative. He was careful to be fair, careful to stick to documented facts, careful not to make claims he couldn't prove. But he was systematic, devastatingly systematic. The video was 48 minutes long. It opened with his own voice, calm and measured. "My name is Marcus Webb. In the past month, I've been portrayed as a villain in a viral video. That video has been seen by tens of millions of people. I understand why people might find my behavior obsessive. This is my response, not a defense. A response. The facts carefully documented in chronological order." He walked through the first trespass. He showed the footage. He showed himself asking them to leave. He showed Karen laughing from her patio. He showed his requests being ignored. And critically, he showed the exact moment where asking politely stopped working, and he had no remaining option except legal recourse. Then he went through the pattern, 15 different instances of trespass, 12 different occasions when children were left unsupervised. The birthday party where a 4-year-old was in.